There was something strangely magical about Paul Reubens, the man the world came to know as Pee-wee Herman. With his childlike laugh, bright red bow tie, and an imagination that turned ordinary moments into absurd comedy, Pee-wee was more than a TV character. He was a cultural phenomenon. But behind the laughs, the quirky voice, and the brightly colored playhouse, there lived a man whose real story was shadowed by loneliness, misunderstanding, and a pain that fame could never truly erase. This is the untold tragedy of Paul Reubens, a man who made millions smile while quietly falling apart inside. Paul Reubens was born Paul Rubenfeld on August 27, 1952, in Peekskill, New York, to parents who were far from the entertainment world. His father, Milton Rubenfeld, was a pilot who had served in World War II and even fought for Israel in its early days. His mother, Judy, was a dedicated teacher. They raised Paul and his two siblings in Sarasota, Florida, a town known for its circus culture, filled with performers, acrobats, and clowns. Maybe that's where Paul first learned that the world was a stage and that laughter could be a form of escape. Even as a child, Paul was drawn to performance. He was funny, yes, but also shy, often using humor as a mask. He once said that he created Pee-wee Herman to be the kind of person who could say and do the things he was too afraid to. Pee-wee wasn't just a character. He was Paul's way of surviving a world that often felt too cruel for someone as sensitive as him. In the 1970s, after studying theater at Boston University and later at Cal Arts, Paul joined the famous comedy troupe The Groundlings. There, surrounded by soon-to-be legends like Phil Hartman and Cassandra Peterson, Paul began shaping his bizarre, lovable alter ego. A man-child with a gray suit, a red bow tie, and a laugh that sounded like joy wrapped in mischief. Pee-wee Herman wasn't meant to be mainstream. He was weird, offbeat, and unapologetically strange, but audiences adored him. The world was changing, and suddenly, this oddball outsider found his way into the heart of American pop culture. By 1981, the Pee-wee Herman Show became a stage sensation, and HBO picked it up for a special. From there, Paul's career exploded. His 1985 film, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, directed by a young Tim Burton, became an instant cult classic. The movie was silly and surreal, a whimsical journey about a man searching for his lost bicycle. Yet, it carried a deeper truth. Pee-wee's innocence reminded people of their own lost childhoods. It was joyful escapism in an increasingly cynical world. Then came Pee-wee's Playhouse, a Saturday morning show that ran from 1986 to 1990. It was bright, colorful, and filled with talking furniture, moral lessons, and unfiltered creativity. Critics loved it, kids adored it, parents appreciated its clever humor. Paul Reubens had done what few comedians could. He built a world where fantasy and innocence coexisted beautifully. But fame has a way of turning even the brightest colors into gray. Behind the laughter, Paul struggled with intense pressure. He was exhausted, overworked, and anxious about being trapped inside a character that wasn't fully him. Pee-wee was his armor, but also his cage. Then, in 1991, everything changed. Paul Reubens was arrested in Florida for an indecent act at an adult theater, a scandal that shattered his reputation overnight. For years, he had been America's favorite man-child, trusted by parents and loved by kids. Now, that image was gone in an instant. The media tore him apart. Late-night shows mocked him relentlessly. And just like that, the man who made the world laugh was labeled a disgrace. Paul went into hiding. For years, he refused interviews, stayed out of the spotlight, and lived quietly. nursing the wounds of public humiliation. He later said that the hardest part wasn't losing fame, it was losing the trust of people who had once seen him as pure and harmless. The arrest became a permanent shadow, one that followed him for decades. But those close to him knew the truth. Paul wasn't a villain. He was a complicated, misunderstood man, caught in a culture that loved to build people up just to watch them fall. In the late 1990s, he slowly began to rebuild. He took small acting roles, from Blow to Mystery Men, often playing eccentric or tragic characters that reflected his own life's duality. Beneath the humor, there was always sadness in Paul's eyes. He wanted to return as Pee-wee, but feared the world would never accept him again. Yet, his fans never forgot. They grew up, but they remembered the joy he brought to their childhoods. Online communities began celebrating Pee-wee's legacy, turning him into a nostalgic icon. By the early 2000s, Paul began to step back into the light, cautiously, like someone testing the warmth of the sun after years in darkness. Then, in 2002, tragedy struck again. He was charged with possession of inappropriate images, a case that would later prove unfounded. But the damage was done. Another storm of public judgment fell upon him, and once again, the headlines drowned out the truth. Paul was crushed. In interviews years later, he said that the world never allowed him to be just human, that Pee-wee's perfection left no room for Paul's flaws. He longed for forgiveness, but the world wasn't ready to listen. Still, he never gave up on the magic of his creation. In 2010, the Pee-wee Herman Show was revived on Broadway to critical acclaim. Then, in 2016, Pee-wee's Big Holiday was released on Netflix, proving that the character still had power, not as a joke, but as a symbol of innocence that could never be destroyed. Behind the laughter, however, Paul was quietly battling something much darker. He had been diagnosed with cancer, a fight he chose to keep private. For 6 years, he endured treatment in silence, never letting the world know how much pain he was in. He continued to smile, to laugh, to write, to dream, because that's who Paul was, someone who believed that even in pain, there was still room for playfulness and light. When news broke in July 2023 that Paul Reubens had passed away at 70, the world was stunned. Most didn't even know he was sick. In his final message, written before his death, Paul apologized to fans for not sharing his illness sooner. He said, "Please accept my apology for not going public with what I've been facing for the last 6 years. I always felt a huge amount of love and respect from my friends, fans, and supporters. I have loved you all so much and enjoyed making art for you." Those words revealed the heart of a man who never stopped caring, even when the world turned its back on him. Paul Reubens was more than the scandal, more than the laughter, more than the red bow tie. He was a reminder that joy and pain often live side by side, that even the funniest people can carry the heaviest hearts. His story isn't just about tragedy, it's about resilience. Despite being misunderstood, mocked, and rejected, he found ways to keep creating. He turned sorrow into art, guilt into grace, and silence into imagination. Pee-wee's world, colorful, childlike, and kind, was Paul's dream of how the world should be, free of judgment, full of laughter, and endlessly forgiving. In the end, Paul found peace not in fame, but in knowing that his work touched generations. Millions of adults who grew up watching Pee-wee's Playhouse still remember how it made them feel safe, happy, and unafraid to be weird. That legacy means more than any award or headline ever could. Behind every laugh he gave us was a man trying to heal himself through the same joy he shared with others. As we remember Paul Reubens, we also remember the lesson he left behind, that no matter how many mistakes you make or how far you fall, there's always a way back through love, laughter, and creativity. He may have left the stage, but his laughter still echoes, not just in the voice of Pee-wee Herman, but in everyone who ever dared to embrace their inner child and find beauty in being different. Paul's life was a tragic symphony, one of brilliance and heartbreak, of laughter and loneliness. But in the end, his story reminds us that even broken hearts can leave behind beautiful music. The laughter he gave us will never fade. It will live on as long as we remember the joy of being unapologetically ourselves. Because that's what Paul Reubens wanted all along. Not perfection, not fame, just the freedom to laugh, to play, and to be loved for who he truly was. Subscribe for more hidden stories that reveal the pain behind the fame.